So welcome to our California Homeschool Network. You can do this, a conference for reluctant homeschool parents. Today, we're going to help answer all of your questions. We're going to introduce you to California Homeschool Network. We're going to present the homeschooling basics one-on-one. We're going to cover why homeschool, the history of education, and we're going to explain learning styles and why they are important. We're also going to discuss why homeschool and school curriculums differ. I'm waiting for my co-host, Marty. Marty and I are currently on the board of California Homeschool Network. California Homeschool Network is a volunteer-run nonprofit organization serving the California homeschool community. We not only help parents get into homeschooling, we help protect homeschooling and the right to homeschool in California. We what else do we do? Let me see. We also create community to help families find their community near them and to be able to engage with other homeschoolers. And it's $30 a year to join California Homeschool Network. And we appreciate it if you join because it helps us be able to protect homeschooling and support your homeschooling journey. You can join on our website. Is that all we have to say about that, Marty?
Of course.
Okay.
Yes.
So Marty was actually one of the original founders of the California Homeschool Network, and we feel very blessed to have him back on the board with us. So thank you, Marty.
You're welcome.
So,
well, to our good audience out there, first of all, welcome. We're excited that you're part of our webinar today, and our hope is that you're going to find that you have the power, that you have the good reasons, especially in today's environment, to do your children a big favor by homeschooling them. And one of the things you have to understand is a lot of people go, am I qualified? And the answer is, let's find out. So I have some questions for you. One, do you love your children? If you do, give a big old howdy, yes, or make a comment below. That would be fantastic. And then now, all you have to do is take your hand and put it on your forehead. Are you about 98.6 degrees? Fantastic. You love and you live. But here's the good news. It is totally impossible, psychologically, physically, academically, spiritually, to do worse than the state of California in educating your children. So with that in mind, I encourage you to really give this new lifestyle, and it's a lifestyle, not a process, it's a lifestyle, a chance to bring your family together and provide your kids with a future that right now the public and in many cases private schools cannot offer. So Wendy, back to you.
So the first thing we're going to cover is the legal paths to homeschool in California, just so you all have an understanding of the ways that you can do that. I'm just finishing putting the how you can join CHN into the chat for everybody. So Marty, are you going to join me on this one? To make sure I don't fumble it up? Okay.
Be sure you don't fumble it up.
So I always like to start by explaining that homeschooling technically doesn't exist. I know we're too far away from each other. I'm going to move over there, Marty. Sorry.
Oh.
Because otherwise we can't both be on camera.
Come to my side of the world.
Okay. Sorry, this is the first time we've done this virtually. So what I always first like to explain is that homeschooling doesn't technically exist in California. You're either a private school student or you're a public school student, but there are 4 legal paths to be able to educate your children at home. Do you have anything to say about that?
You will find in many cases that you'll get a little bit of flack from your children's previous school. Many times you'll hear from people, oh, homeschooling is illegal. No, you cannot do that. But it has been permissible and legal in the state of California because we do fall under private school statutes.
Right.
And that is the very important thing you have to be careful about. And then we'll get into how you can homeschool over the next time period to answer those questions.
Right. So the first path that we like to support families in doing is by filing the private school affidavit. So with that, you file that every school year between October 1st and October 15th. It's a very simple form to fill out. It takes maybe 2 to 5 minutes to fill it out. And basically you're just giving general information about your school, your new private school, to the CDE so they can put you in the privately not listed database of private schools. And that is you forming your own private school at your home to educate your children.
And the important part of what Wendy just mentioned is that if you have less than 6 students in your family, then you will not end up in the public directory. There is a private school directory within the state of California that all private schools with more than 6 students are listed. Now that provides you, because you're not listed, it gives you some degree of autonomy, but not 100%.
So after you file that, and it's also important to know that if you decide that you're pulling your children out of their public school or their private school, their other like a brick and mortar private school, and you want to say do that in January instead of October, it's not too late. You can still begin homeschooling your child at any time during the school year. You would just go to the CD's website and file that private school affidavit at the time you pull your child out of school. So it would be the next year that if you're continuing to homeschool, that you then file that private school affidavit in October. But I feel like there's going to be a lot of families pulling their students out in January, and it will not be too late. You can file at that point.
And the private school affidavit provides you with the most freedom that you can ever have, because you are the teacher, you are the principal, you are the plumber, you are the playground supervisor. You're not going to be under the canopy of another organization, whether it be a PSP or a charter. So if you like freedom, then that's where to go. Yes. If you tend to get fearful easily, then the other options we will be talking about might be a better choice.
Or if you feel like you need help filing the paperwork or anything like that. I would say something else at the PSA. Definitely the most freedom. And I think that was it.
There you go.
Okay, so then after you file that private school affidavit, you're going to want to order your children's records from their past school. So you have their cumulative file, and we have step-by-step instructions on our website, and I will put that link in as soon as I get back over there to my computer so you guys can all have that. So then the next legal option that we can talk about is a private school satellite program. And what this is a super helpful entity, or maybe a homeschool parent who's been homeschooling for a long time feels very confident in how to file with the California Department of Ed and how to keep those school records. They would file for you on behalf of your family. You become a teacher in their private school, and your students are enrolled in their private school, but they keep your records. Marty and Carolyn here at Excellence in Education, who have been so nice to host us, they have a PSP that they've been running for how many years?
35 years.
35 years.
30 years. I've been corrected by the administrator.
Yes, the administrator corrected him.
Call my wife.
I think the most important thing when joining a PSP is that you talk to them first, you get to know them, make sure that they're going to be a good match for your family, and make sure that they know how to deal with everything that might pop up. It's more than just keeping those records. Make sure that they know how to file for a work permit if your student wants to work. Make sure they can deal with child protective services if they show up at your door. So you don't want someone that just formed their PSP last week. You want someone that's been doing it for quite some time. So I'm going to let Marty talk a little bit about his experience and how he runs the PSP.
Okay. The most important part is that there's compatibility between you and the PSP. Most PSPs have little rules and regulations. They want you to maybe follow a certain curriculum, or they're exclusive, meaning that if you're not a particular church faith, or if you're not a particular whatever, you cannot join. There are others that are totally inclusive, like EIE, we're inclusive. You also want to look at the support system. Does that PSP have a park day? Do they have field trips? Do they participate in counseling, whether it be counseling to help you overcome your fear, or counseling in how to achieve the goal for your child in becoming what they want to become. You got to have a knowledge, that PSP owner should have knowledge of what it takes to get into a professional career via the college, university, or a vocational pathway via trade school or apprenticeship. There are a lot of different parameters to actually running a school.
Right.
And you are a school, and it's not that difficult. And as the PSP has a lot of years of experience, they become, I think, better in time. But it's not just, oh, here's my PSP, my PSA, I'm going to charge you X number of dollars a month. And then you as the PSP holder go, bring in the money, bring in the money. No, it takes effort.
Yeah.
And you got to love your students. You got to love where they're at. And yes, you will be dealing sometimes with government agencies. You will be, we have dealt with everything from law enforcement to welfare to social services, and we're prepared for it. And if you're a PSP you are looking at, just be sure they can handle those kind of things. Not that it's going to happen to you, but they have to have the courage and the knowledge to really participate in that.
Right.
And also, what you want to do is talk to that owner, talk to that PSP head. What do they want from you? And is it something that you can provide for them? And also look at personality.
Right.
Personality is very important. Some people just click, some people don't. But when you join that PSP, do they want to have testing, for instance? Do they want to have immunizations? Do they want you to follow a particular curriculum path? What restrictions do they have in respect to curriculum? Some PSPs want you to follow a particular style or publisher. Find out what the freedom component is, what I call the freedom factor.
Right. Also take into account that you may be with this PSP for some time. And if your children are older, check into what their graduation requirements are going to be. What if there's a graduating project that they need to complete, something like that, and make sure it's of interest to your student and that they're going to want to go ahead and do that. A lot of families I talk to, I know, get to the end of their homeschooling journey in those last 4 years, and they're suddenly worried about creating that transcript. And so a PSP is a great thing to join at that point if you don't want to create that transcript, and they can help you pull together the classes that are required for graduating in California and help you with that transcript. So that's a service that you provide even separate of your PSP, but it's important.
The transcript, the way I look at my high school students, and we do transcripts, we write the letters, we do all the stuff required to help the kids get to college. When it comes to that senior year, I take kind of a psychologically different look at that student, and I look at it as being a product. And it's my job to sell that product to either a admissions officer or a human resources person at a corporation. And what I need to do is advertise that student. The transcript is the ultimate advertisement. If you look at the typical high school, 220 units, cookie cutter, math, science, English, A to G, all the way, there's no spectacular difference from one transcript to another.
They look like every other student that's graduated from high school in California.
Exactly. With our students have up to 300 units, 350 units. They have a diversity. And if you do it right, you'll have, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but have your kids, and during high school, especially if they're going to be college bound, have college classes in that interim. Yeah. There's no reason why your high school student cannot have an AA degree and his high school diploma on the same week.
Yeah, my middle schooler's in college classes right now. So totally doable.
Yes, absolutely.
So I love the option of the PSP because it helps relieve me of the burden of keeping those records. They're not hard to keep. I just don't want to keep them. So I love PSP options.
There you go.
So those are kind of the two, the PSA and joining a PSP are kind of the two with the most amount of freedom. Those are the private homeschooling paths. The next paths that we want to talk about are if you want to enroll in like a charter school or a county office of ed or a district independent study program. And please keep in mind, these are public homeschooling options, and you are going to be tied to following state standards, testing, and doing certain things that are required by the public school system. So while these are great options for families that maybe need a little more support and they're afraid they can't afford homeschooling, which we'll talk about later. Everyone can afford to homeschool. It's very, very cheap. So, but some families feel like, oh, we want to do all these classes. We have all these things we want to do. We need that money. We want to make sure our student stays on track with what's going on in the public school. Maybe they consider that they're going to go back in a year or something like that. So then a charter school or an independent study program is a good option. This is just like enrolling in your local public school. They're going to ask you for all of those same documents that you turn in, your immunization report, a birth certificate, and all of those things that you have to turn in. And you're going to meet with a teacher. You're going to be required to meet with a teacher at least once every 20 school days to go over the progress that you've made and to talk about what progress you need to make for the next learning period. So my children were in charter schools for 12 years and it worked great, but we did find that it was not allowing us enough freedom anymore. So we've been out of the charter for, it's almost going to be a year. What else do we have to say about charter schools?
Charter schools, I believe, can be very instrumental if you're a short-term homeschooler.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say you're trying to get through this COVID junk and your kids can't be in their brick and mortar school and you decide to pull them out, but you have every intention to put them back into the system. So being with a charter, that transformation back into the public school system is seamless and quite easy. Sometimes with the public or the private side, some schools get a little bit dicey in bringing back a homeschooler. It's doable. You just maybe have to take it more.
Yeah, high school is the most trouble, right? You can go in and out in elementary, but once you're in high school, a lot of the high schools, if you try and go back into a public high school, they want to know that you've come from an accredited high school, or they're not going to possibly take your credits from your unaccredited high school. So
exactly right. And we counsel our students that at 9th grade, make up your mind.
Make up your mind.
Let's go all the way through. You might squeeze 9th grade out, but 10th through 12th is very difficult. It's easy to transfer from the charter to a PSP. We do it all the time.
Yes.
And we do successfully bring people back into the public sector, but it can be more difficult. So if you're a short-termer, the charter becomes, I think, a good option. When it gets to high school, the charters tend to, at this point in history, want to push an A to G program. They want everyone to go to college. My experience is that not everybody needs to go to college or wants to go to college or can afford to go to college. They much rather be in the trades, start their career path 5 years earlier than a college graduate. So you have to really look at those parameters when you consider charter versus the private sector. And at this point, when it gets to the immunization, vaccine stuff, it's kind of a mixed bag as far as charters.
It depends on what kind of programs the charter has. So if it's a completely non-classroom based charter, you can enroll in a non-classroom based charter school without being fully immunized. You just would provide them a letter stating that you're not immunized, or a blank immunization card, or a partially filled out immunization card. So if you're not meeting with other students, you don't have to be immunized. But if it's a charter school that has maybe a 2-day-a-week learning center where you can go and take classes, they might make you opt out of that center and you can't go there if you're not immunized. But if you are immunized, you can. So those would all be questions that you need to ask of the charter school, and they have varying programs and varying supports. The other important thing I wanted to say, that if you're trying out homeschooling like during the pandemic and you don't like what's happening with distance learning, or it's not even called that anymore, but if the charter schools have been doing this kind of independent study program for years and years and years. So they're better at it than our district schools are. So if it's a temporary fix, maybe your kid's out on that 10-day hold because of COVID and you just don't want to deal with that anymore, then a charter school is a great option. You could finish out the school year there.
Yeah. In conclusion, what you want to, there's a question here. It says,
Right.
if I homeschool through a charter, do I still need to file a PSA? If you are homeschooling through a charter or homeschooling through a PSP, you do not
Right.
file a PSA. The
Yes.
only time you file a PSA is if you want to be that ultimate independent homeschool family.
Think of it this way. If you file that PSA, you're the administrator of your new private school. So then it's your responsibility to file the PSA and keep those records. If you join a charter school, you're enrolling in another public school and they're keeping all of those records. So they're doing all that work and you do not need to file. If you join a PSP, Marty and Carolyn here, they'll do all that work. They'll order your student records and they'll file everything and you do not file the PSA. So your students can only be enrolled in one school in California at a time, unless it's like community college classes. They can take community college classes. What can we talk just a little briefly? I get a lot of questions when I'm answering the phones for CHN about the, I always call it a loophole in the education law that says that if you're a credentialed teacher or you hire a credentialed teacher, that you don't have to file the PSA and that you don't have to be part of any of these schools. And I know that as an organization, we don't suggest this because there's no specific guidelines on how to track what you're doing and how you're doing it. So we always suggest that you file the private school affidavit, but ultimately that requires 180 days of education between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Is there anything else with that one?
Well, see, that's the funny part. Okay, they require this 180 days theoretically, but listen just think about this.
There's a loophole there.
If you walk down the hallway each morning, you open the door of your child and they're in their bed or they're at their desk, you go present. And so they have 100% attendance.
Yes.
And don't forget, homeschooling is not a process, it's a lifestyle.
Right.
And your child can be learning all day long if they're not glued for 12 hours to a screen playing video games. And even video games that do learn a little bit of strategy. But
they should have a variety in their learning is what we're trying to say.
Have diversity.
They're always learning no matter what they're doing, but they should have some diversity.
And they're always trying to fake out the administration. That's mom and dad.
Right.
So, and by the way, it's interesting. Maybe we should talk about our history.
Right.
It's really great to hear great talk from great people like us, but then you don't know what the fruit on the tree is. Now, in our particular case, we're pretty proud of our daughters. I have 2 daughters. And my oldest at age 10 said, "Dad, I want to be a pilot." And so airhead is what we did. And we integrated aviation into math, into science, into history, into art. We made the aviation alive. Then at age 12, she wanted to be a missionary. And we, of course, said, fantastic. But here's the fun part. At age 20, she's the first woman pilot to fly with the African Inland Missions Aviation Team in Kenya, Africa. So she's able to achieve both her dreams. And today, she's a very happy homeschool mom, married to an airline pilot. And on a farm, they're having a blast. And these kids are doing well. She's doing well because she was able to achieve her dream. And so that's real important. My other daughter was a totally different creature. Tanaya, I could put her into an Indian reservation and she'd fit in as far as her darker skin, dark hair, dark eyes. But Tylene is this blonde from Sweden. And she was homeschooled through 10th grade, but she was born with this phenomenal genetic predisposition to party 101. And therefore, we sent her to a Christian school for her last 2 years. And that worked out fantastic for her. It really did. And today she's a pastor for a women's ministry to a large church in San Diego with 3 kids and a husband. So we feel that our fruit is good. And I can say that the homeschool community has the same statistics as any other community. We have our phenomenal successes. In fact, on January 6th, one of our clients, she was fired from her job because she was working for President Trump.
Oh, yeah.
And we also have kids that go into the military. We have kids that go into business. We have kids going to the trades. We have kids going into college and grad school. And we have a few dunderheads that failed. But that's okay. And because we represent the real world, we represent the community. So it's up to you as the parent who's considering homeschooling. Hey, we know that homeschooling can work. And we know that we as an organization, as CHN or a PSP owner, we can assist you in achieving your child's goal. What you want to do is set up a time where you know and you figure out what your child, not what you want for your child, what your child wants at age 25. Then you work toward that goal.
Right.
And PSPs, PSAs, charters can all be part of that mix.
Yes, it can all be part, right. I think it's important to realize that homeschooling opens up so many hours in the day that your student can spend really following their passions. And even if those passions change from year to year, they're still getting way more experience than they would have gotten if they're sitting in the classroom behind a desk or behind a computer for a school for 8 hours a day. So homeschooling definitely opens up a lot of options.
Are we following the chat?
I'm going to go back to the chat while we move to our next topic.
Let's do that.
Okay.
So I see a lot of chats going there.
I will put the link in. You're asking for the link to file the private school affidavit. I'll text that in 1 second. What is a PSP and a PSA? So a private school affidavit is where you are becoming your own private school in your home. You'll be the administrator. You'll be filing annually the PSA, the private school affidavit. You'll be keeping all the student records. You'll be in charge of all of the studies in coming up with the curriculum and everything like that. If you join a PSP, that's a private school satellite program. And then someone like Marty and Carolyn, they run a private school satellite program and they will file the PSA for you. You enroll in their school, they keep the records, and they also offer their advice and their expertise in being able to homeschool. If I homeschool through a charter, do I still need to file the affidavit? No, I think we kind of explained that. You enroll in only one school. So you either file the affidavit and you're your own private school, or you sign up for a PSP and you're part of that school, or you file the PSA yourself and you become your own school. My child is a high schooler and a charter right now, but they are mandating the vaccine. So it must not be a non-classroom based charter school. Rosa, maybe you can give me some more information. So a non-classroom based charter school does not have to mandate any vaccines. They would only need to mandate a vaccine if the students were for some reason meeting. So let me know what charter school that is and I can help you with that.
And that might change from county to county. Maybe in certain parts of the county, like Northern California up toward Redding, it's huge charter country. So that the counties up there may have different attitudes toward vaccines and whatever than someone in San Diego County or LA County or Riverside County or Kern County. So it's going to all depend upon.
Well, ultimately, it boils down to SB 277, which made the requirements for a bunch of vaccines to be required of students in California schools. That included public schools and private schools. Come January, that law is most likely going to change because they most likely are going to want to add the COVID vaccine to that list of vaccines. So a non-classroom based charter school or private homeschooling were the only kind of loopholes to SB 277 and being able to not be vaccinated and have your child attend school in California. So that all may change. They may pull charter schools out of the loophole and they may only leave in private homeschooling. We don't know what they're going to do. We won't see what they're going to propose until they get back into the Capitol in January. Do all charter schools offer homeschooling? No. There is a specific model of charter school called non-classroom based charter schools, and I have a list of them that I will put into the chat for you. But charter schools can be all different types of models. Non-classroom based, they can be completely brick and mortar. It looks just like your district school, but maybe they have a specialty like everything is around STEM or everything is Waldorf or Montessori. So It just depends on what kind of charter. Then there's like hybrid charters where the students maybe go 3 days a week and they're at home 2 days a week. So there's a bunch of different models. So the only ones that offer a homeschool type support program is a non-classroom based charter school. Our charter schools, the only ones that offer an in-person comment. So no, like if you're homeschooling privately, there's lots of ways to find groups of people to interact with, park days. I would suggest you get onto Facebook if you're not already on Facebook. We seem to hang out on Facebook as homeschoolers. And so in our groups, we're constantly posting about field trips and park days and all classes that we're doing and all kinds of things that we're doing. So I'll put a link also to the Facebook pages. I hope I'm remembering everything I got to put a link to, but I have a link to a bunch of Facebook pages that you can join. And then say you join a PSP in a local area to where you are. Very often and commonly, they would offer field trips and like Marty has classes right here at his location. They offer field trips and they have a park day. So if you join a PSP, they also might be having in-person opportunities to get together. Not even all charter schools have in-person opportunities. It just depends on the charter and what they feel like is important. A lot of them do offer field trips and classes. But again, you might not be able to attend those if your child isn't fully vaccinated. It just depends on the school. And each school can set their own rules as long as it's the rules that they set can be stricter than the law, but they at least have to follow the law.
And you want to look at support groups that are in the area. That goes beyond park day. Support groups, a lot of times do have field trips. They do have classes. They're like little resource centers.
Right.
Like around here, we have fundamentals. Heather, you have some programs. You're a support group as well. And what you want to do is find out who these people are. There's small ones and there's large ones like Wild and Free and Holistic Moms. They have homeschool support groups built within their organizations. Yeah. So just find, and also just like you would with a park day, just like you would with a PSP, check out the personality. See if it's who you'd like to be around.
Yes, exactly.
That's so important.
So someone asked what the first step is if you're in a public school now. So the first step I would suggest is reaching out to us at California Homeschool Network. And you most likely will get a hold of me and I can help walk you through what your options are and kind of help you decide which option you feel is going to be best for you. Charter school, PSP, PSA. And then I can provide you with some options depending on where you live. And that's for anyone that wants to contact me. I'll put the email address here in the chat for us.
But the simple answer to that as well is that you will want to investigate who you want to be part of before you talk to the school.
Yes.
And then the process will be that you will withdraw from the school because you as the parent have to withdraw your child from the school. Then if you do your own PSA, that's one thing. If you do a charter or a PSP, all three entities will request the records of your child. Right. And what that does, it finalizes the transfer of your student to a different educational agency. And this is where being part of a PSP or a charter has an advantage because it's not the parent pulling the child out, but it's a different organization registered with the private school directory or part of the public school asking for the records. And that can oftentimes make a far more smooth transition from the public school to the private sector. And most private schools, they're not quite as particular about it, except that they lose a lot of money too. So,
right.
But don't let anybody tell you it's illegal to homeschool.
No, and also don't let anyone tell you that you can't pull your child out. I get lots of calls from parents whose students have IEPs, and they are being told by their school district that they cannot pull their child out of school at this time. And in California, you as the parent have the right at any time to pull your child out of any school. So you're not stuck in any school. So don't let them tell you that. And your first step is to figure out which one you want to do. Don't pull your child out and then come figure out what you want to do. So exactly right. Let us know and we'll help you with that. Yes. Okay. So I am going to, so I can finish putting all these in the chat. Okay. I will answer this one on the chat, but I am going to introduce us to Heather Martinson. we're going to pull the camera over to us.
There we go.
Ooh,
Bye, everybody.
that's
See you later.
fancy. So Heather's a dear friend of mine. I've known her since I first started homeschooling, and she'd been homeschooling a long time before that, but I met her when Athen was 6 or 5, and we started doing her classes with Celebration Education, and they're really great hands-on thematic classes, and she even lets the kids vote on the theme for the next year. So I just love her classes and everything she does, and she agreed to come here and do her really great talk about kind of the history of education. So I'm gonna pass it over to Heather, and then I'm going to answer your questions. Thanks for being here, Heather.
No problem. Happy to be here. So, and my understanding is that majority of people who would be attending today are people who are completely brand new to homeschooling, and the majority of you are probably people who thought you would never homeschool, and you're feeling like you're being shoved into it, and that's okay, because people like us, and there are tons of experienced homeschoolers that are here to help you, and you got this. Right? That's what it's called.
Exactly.
You can do it. We believe in you, and we hope you believe in yourself as well. So let's see. But what I want to talk to you guys about is, even though you got shoved into this homeschooling world, I want you to understand that the truth is homeschooling gives your child a lot of advantages. I'm going to go over a whole lot of those right now without even getting into details like curriculum and that sort of thing. That's for someone else. But I want to share some interesting things with you. First of all, it looks on the screen.
Yeah.
First of all, back in 1842, this is the latest technology in communication. It was a printing press, right? But today we have, it's unlimited. You can talk to anyone in the world anytime. It's incredible what we can do. Back in 1910, the latest transportation technology was a horse and buggy. Today, people are going into space. It's incredible. It's insane. There's just so many advances that have been made. It's exciting and wonderful. So back in 1897, this is what a classroom looked like. But guess what? This is the classroom today. I don't know what you're feeling about this, but to me, there's a huge lack of, I don't know. There needs to be progress. That's what there's a complete lack of progress in the area of education. The kids and have just been left behind. All of this. It's a big disconnect. That's really the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
There's so much available, so many opportunities today. In my opinion, there is no longer a reason to stuff children in a classroom. Okay, so you might be concerned about problems at school, and people talk about school reform. They're saying teachers aren't paid enough, or they're paid too much. People are worried about bullying. People think that it's just too boring. They think there's too much homework or not enough homework. They think that the schools are dumbed down, that their kids aren't getting taught what they need to know. They feel like the schools are underfunded or overfunded. Many people feel like there's too much indoctrination going on in the schools. And of course, right now, the big push is all the new homeschoolers are primarily coming because of the COVID restrictions that they don't agree with. So, but all of these things are good reasons to not go to school. But what I want to share with you guys today are incredible reasons to not go to school, because there's so much more available to you. It used to be thought that the longer a child spends in the classroom, the smarter they will be. The truth is, this is no longer the case. In my opinion, the sooner a child gets out of the classroom, the sooner they become advantaged. So I know you want your kids to be their best unique selves. You want them to have learning experiences that are exactly at their level and in their learning style, because you know that that's how your children learn best. To help in that endeavor, I want to help to give you a shift in your thinking about schooling, a shift that will make a long-term difference for your kids. Maya Angelou said, if you are always trying to be normal, you will never know how amazing you can be. I don't want your kids to be normal. I would never want my kids to be normal, right? There's so much better in life than trying to make your kids like all the other kids. And this is the core of what I'm talking about today. Long before the internet existed, children were learning outside of school, whether by choice or by circumstances. Many impressive people gained their educations outside of a traditional classroom. People like Thomas Edison, Alexander Hamilton, Abraham Lincoln, Claude Monet, Florence Nightingale, Booker T. Washington, George Washington, Phyllis Wheatley, Laura Ingalls Wilder, Orville and Wilbur Wright, Susan B. Anthony, Charlie Chaplin, Charles Dickens, Albert Einstein, Benjamin Franklin, the Williams sisters. There are so many people. I could just keep going on. There are so many people that got their educations outside of a classroom, and they were fortunate to get their education outside the classroom. They got the education that matched their talents and allowed them to use their genius, the things that they were good at, instead of trying to make them like all the other kids, right? They got their educations through non-traditional means, giving them these opportunities that they would not be allowed to have if they were in school. I'm going to give you the example of tennis superstars Venus and Serena Williams. I don't know if you know, but they were homeschooled. Because they were homeschooled, they had the opportunity to spend a lot of time on the tennis court, more than most kids were. I mean, they spent less time schooling, more time on the tennis court, increasing their genius, right? Becoming, just really building on the skills that they were given from birth, right? They're just amazing. But we know that their time away from, that their time spent on the courts did not hurt their education, because these girls are, let's see, I have the list right here. They are also college graduates, business owners, investors, actors, and authors. Nobody would say that these girls' education suffered, because they spent the majority of their time doing the things that were best suited for them, or learning in the way that complemented their genius. I believe that every child has genius. I believe that every child has something they're excellent at, and that they should be spending their time doing those things instead of spending the time being like all the other kids in the classroom, right? Einstein once said, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. We don't want to make our kids even try to be like the other kids. We want to bring out their genius, right? So because you don't get something new by doing the same thing that everyone else does, I want to share with you a little bit about my story, about how I got into homeschooling. Back in the 80s, I decided I was going to homeschool my kids. This was before my oldest was even born. That's because my mom started homeschooling my younger siblings when I was just a newlywed. And so I thought she was crazy, but then after learning more about homeschooling, I wanted to be crazy just like her. So the reason why I chose to homeschool is because I wanted my children to have the opportunity to learn from more than just one teacher and one textbook. I wanted them to be able to learn from anywhere. I wanted them to be able to research from the library. I wanted them to go and touch and see and experience real life things and learn from those. So that's what I did. But when I started out, like most new homeschoolers, feeling nervous and not completely confident in myself and feeling like I couldn't afford it. So I joined, there were no charter schools at the time. This is pre-charter schools that had any charter schools. Anyway, so I went through the county, and the county gave me a stack of books. My two older kids, I got a stack of books for each of them. And they were just a year apart in school, and they were academically similar. And it was kind of frustrating for me to do like this schoolwork with this kid and this schoolwork with this kid. So I asked the school, would it be okay if we just kind of combine, at least for some of the subjects like social studies and science, this kind of thing? It'd be more fun and more interesting, and I'm wasting less time, right? But the school told me, no, you can't skip grades. And I mean, that wasn't even what I was asking for. I just wanted to have more flexibility in my learning. I wanted to make the learning come alive for my kids. So going forward, I went ahead and did the PSA, the private school affidavit, so that we had freedom. And I went out without the safety net, and I'm so glad we did, because it was great. My kids could read, write, solve, explore as much as they wanted, and it worked. We spent more time together, and we didn't need to be like doing worksheets when we can be doing things that were like real writing and real reading, real books. It was just so much more, just enriching, and it was just what my kids needed. So that was so fun. So the majority of my kids' learning happened without schools and without curriculum. We had adventures, and they were allowed to study whatever they wanted. But by now, my kids are all grown, and 2 of them are graduated from college. But like Marty said, not everyone's destined for college. And I don't know if my other 2 will graduate. It doesn't matter, because that may or may not be what's in the books for them. So, but I know that a lot of people consider college graduation to be successful. So you know that homeschooling can be successful because it happened, right? All right, so, but I want you to know that my kids were not perfect. No kids are, right? So my child that's on the autism spectrum wrote volumes of journals before graduating high school at 17. My dyslexic child, as a teen, his favorite author was Steinbeck. My child that was that waited until he was 10 to start reading read a stack of books taller than himself by the time he was 11. My child that taught himself to read when he was 4, he was studying the elements at age 7, something he wouldn't be allowed to do if he were in the schools, because he'd be too busy doing all the 7-year-old stuff, no elements there. So these are things my kids could do because they were not in a traditional school. So an important thing that I want you to remember is that learning is more important than schooling. If you're spending all of your time just schooling your kids, you might actually be missing out on the learning, okay? So science, reading, social studies, STEM, math, writing, all these things can be learned through natural, normal, everyday things. I mean, you can read with your kids, you can write with your kids, you can experiment with your kids. You don't even need a curriculum. Just enjoy the time together and learn and grow and experience together. So they don't even need a classroom, right? They don't need textbooks. Because as soon as the kids get outside the classroom, outside the box and into the real world and real learning, they are instantly advantaged. They get to read real books, write meaningful things, touch real things, and solve real problems. This is powerful learning. The equal of it does not exist in school. And if you are homeschooling, it's important to remember that you don't need to try to duplicate school at home. This is probably the number one reason why people fail at homeschooling, is because they try to school at home. Schooling is a completely different environment. The dynamic is 100% different when you're working one-on-one or in a small group with kids. So in 2006, I started Celebration Education. So this is where groups of kids come together to experience fun learning experiences. They come 1, 2, or 3 days a week. We use our own non-standardized curriculum. We have where it's like the kids get to experience things. It's like these adventures that are pulled in, and it's just so much fun. And I'm going to share some of the things that Celebration Education does and some of the things that I've done over the years with my kids. So number one, right at the top of the list of things that can create a powerful learning experience for your kids is curiosity. So the schools have it backward. Here's the thing. The schools, they give the kids all the answers and then they ask the questions, right? And so then the kids go through this recurring thing with read, regurgitate, regret, and over and over. And it's no wonder they start to hate school, right? But when kids are curious, when kids are like, what is this thing? When they're like, Mom, tell me about this, or what would happen if this happened, if I did this, they're I mean, as you know, as they're young, they're always asking questions. But if you don't stop them, they're going to keep asking questions their whole life. And that's a good thing, because especially as they get older, they learn how to find the answers themselves. And that's the correct way to learn. You get introduced to some interesting things, you ask questions, and you find the answers. That's when kids start to take the lead in their education. They're going out and searching for things that they want to know. One time I was talking to one of my sons about something that he thought was really interesting. He had talked about his friends in scouting about it, and I'm like, oh well, what did your friends say? And he said, oh, they're public school kids. You know, in his opinion, they're not curious about anything. They're not learning anything because they're just playing read, regurgitate, regret. They want to get rid of it as soon as possible, right? They don't want to have anything to do with that, with interesting and incredible things. So also when the lockdown first happened, I was like, oh yes, kids are going home. They're finally going to learn through natural and real ways. I was so excited for a moment until all the kids were shoved onto Zoom. I was so frustrated. I mean, the classroom is bad enough, but shoving a classroom into a Zoom call, my stomach was just turning. I'm thinking Zoom learning is what you do with a microscope or a magnifying glass, right? Touching and experiencing real things. That's real learning. You can have the books, you can have the academics, but why would a kid even care about it if he can't even be involved with it and touch it and experience it? It's just so much more powerful, so much more opportunities for your kids when they're experiencing real things. Sitting around for 6 hours a day is a very poor way to teaching for learning, for kids to be learning. I don't even say teaching, because I feel like they're doing the teaching. They're teaching themselves, right? We're just there to help them. We're just there to introduce them to the next experience and help them, have that curiosity and continue to want to know more. Louis L'Amour said, acquiring an education has many aspects, one of which school is only one. And the present approach is, I believe, the wrong one. Our method of instruction does much to hamper learning. Our approach is pedestrian. We teach a child to creep when he should be running. I believe this so much because their kids are getting just little drips of information. It's like a little bit here and then a little bit the next day and a little bit the next day. No wonder kids are bored. Kids love learning big concepts, lots of things all at once. And if they are interested in something, let them soak it in, let them learn it as much as they want. Don't tell them they have to be done in 10 minutes, right? Okay, this is a Google search I did last year. You know how you start typing into the Google search bar and then suggestions pop up? These suggestions are based on real searches. So, and I don't have my glasses on. I can't even read this on my screen right now. So people said, when I go to school, I feel sick. I feel like I'm dying. Some feel fantastic, and that's great, but others feel depressed, suicidal, nauseous, and I don't know what itchy is all about. Butterflies is understandable, I think. But this is what's happening with our kids in school. This is when people type, when I go to school, I feel these are the things they're feeling. And it's just so unfortunate. And that's pre-pandemic or during the pandemic even. But the thing is kids like to learn. It's school they don't like. They like spending time with friends, but more and more kids actually need to get away from a toxic social environment as well. They need the ability to choose, they need the ability to choose their friends and to avoid bullies. Even teachers sometimes are very belittling to kids, which is unfortunate. Because emotion is the gatekeeper to learning and performance. When a child is in a relaxed and alert state, this is when their brains are in the best condition for learning. If they feel stressed and worried, or if they're being bullied in any way, their brain is shutting down. They're not having the opportunity to have those higher learning experiences. So we want to make sure that whatever learning environment the child is in, that it's a positive one and that they are happy while they're learning. One of the things that will help them be happy is by letting them learn through meaningful ways. So this is Dr. Benjamin Bloom, his Taxonomy of Educational Objectives. He basically said when you're assessing what a child knows or a student when you're like, instead of giving them a test, which only like a fill in the blank or fill in the bubble test, he says that's only assessing their knowledge and comprehension. And that's very superficial. And it doesn't really show a depth, any kind of depth of learning. Again, that's the read, regurgitate, regret, right? The kids are going to forget most of the stuff on the test. We all did. I mean, we all went to school, but how much of what we learned at school do we even remember? But the more powerful learning experiences are when kids have the opportunity to apply the information, to analyze the information, to synthesize it in with other things they already know, and to even evaluate, is it even worth looking into? So those things are the deeper learning experiences. That's when the learning becomes profound, and then it's remembered for longer. It's more desirable. The kids want to know more. It's just so much more powerful than just, again, read, regurgitate, regret, right? We want to have those deep learning experiences. And the great thing is you don't need worksheets, you don't need textbooks to have those deeper learning experiences. You might have to go to Home Depot more often though, because if you're working on projects, that's what it was for me. My boys were always like, Mom, can you go get this thing for me? It was a library and Home Depot was the two places I got most of our if you want to call it curriculum from, because that's what my boys, that's what was meaningful to them. So instead of doing the worksheets, you get to do projects, right? And they can come in any shape or form for any school subject. There are a variety of ways that you can get into projects, but not just the fun subjects like science and so forth that you can do projects with, but you can have any school subject like reading, writing, and math. Like these kids right here, they're doing these without, I mean, here's a kid doing a pie chart on a dry erase table. He didn't need a worksheet. He was given a challenge to do a survey and then make a pie chart that reflects the results of the survey. So that's what he was working on. Or another kid was playing store. And, there's a kid who just wants to read. It was his choice. There were two kids on this slide. They just wanted to read and they were allowed to. And a girl who's being annoyed that we're taking a picture of her while she's trying to write something. So, I mean, all of these things, this is without a curriculum. Your children can write. They can write more, read more, and do more math if they're not just plain given a worksheet and told to finish it in 10 minutes. I also like to give children choices. Instead of just handing them a worksheet, you say, hey, here's 3 different things that you might enjoy. Give them a whole potluck of opportunities. Your public school upbringing probably taught you that learners need to be told exactly what to learn and when. But the truth is, when kids are interested in something, they have an amazing ability to choose the experiences that are just right for them. They don't want stuff that's too easy, right? Because of baby stuff. They're not going to take something that's too hard, but they're excellent at choosing the activities that just take them that much farther into where they're ready, to make them stretch just a little bit to bring them to the next level. So if your kids are giving you pushback in your learning, it's because you haven't yet found the right school situation for them or the right learning situation for them. It's because the learning is not yet delicious to them. It's not yet what your children are wanting. Also, schools have to prove that they are being responsible with the tax dollars they use. And so to prove their effectiveness or ineffectiveness, they have to, they created the standards and they have to test and categorize all the kids to be able to show how well they're doing. So, but by assessing the children, this is the very reason actually that the schools will never be good enough, because there's one standard that all the kids have to live by and work toward. But they don't take into consideration any child's genius, anything that they're good at. Nobody cares, right? They spend extra time and money for the kids that are falling behind. And but the truth is, when you're working within a child's genius, those things come because their brain's working the way that it's meant to be working, right? So you don't have to worry about those things. But way too often, your children are defined by their weaknesses, and they have the undue stress that's applied on them. And sometimes they just feel like they're never, ever going to be smart enough. And it's just sad and becomes a downward spiral for some kids. And again, they hate school, right? So it's something that we don't do. My kids, when my kids were growing up, they never even knew what grade they were in. You know, someone's like, oh, it's someone at the store, whatever. They're like, oh, what grade are you in? My kids look at me like, Mom, how do I answer this question? Because we didn't do grades, we didn't do grading, we didn't do testing. It wasn't necessary. When you're working one-on-one with a kid, you know what they know, and you don't have to test it. So, and I want to share with you also multiple intelligences. I've been talking a lot about a child's genius, but a genius doesn't have to be just the academic things like reading, writing, and math. It could be any intelligence. It could be nature smart or people smart, or it could be self-smart, a person who knows who they are, or music smart. There are actually more than this number of intelligence people have identified, but what we need to do is recognize all the intelligences. I love the story that Marty told about his daughter that was interested in aviation and missionary work and ended up combining the two. Isn't that amazing? I think that's incredible. So, and that happens all the time too, where kids they have the math smart, or they have the writing smart, but they also have something else, and they combine the two and it becomes just this magical thing. But you need to give them the opportunity to experience those other things as well. So don't cut them off from those things. I like to have children learning happen along with movement. When a child sits around for too long, anyone, all of us, when we are just sitting still for too long, our brain starts to just kind of settle in, we get relaxed, there's literally less oxygen in the brain. But when you're moving and when the entire body is engaged in the learning, this is when the learning happens faster, it's more memorable. And so again, it's another powerful tool. There was recently a mom, she was on a call with me, and she was really frustrated because her little kindergartner refused to sit down and learn her letters. And I'm like, why would she, And I said, put the letters on the wall and make her run around and, find the A, find the Z, whatever, make it a game, make it a movement thing, pull in that movement. There's really no reason to have your kids sit for all their schoolwork. That's schooling, not necessarily learning. Okay. So remember, when possible, to bring in movement for your kids. And I love field trips. Instead of sitting in a crowded classroom for yet another day, take your kids out to the real world. Let them talk to experts in their fields. Let them see the thing you're studying in its element. There's just no comparison. And again, once they're on field trips, they're going to start asking all those questions again, right? And then you're going to need to go to the library again. And okay, for me, when my kids were little, there was no internet. I'm old, but so internet too. You can look it up on your phone. You don't have to wait for the library. But so it's just there's just so many wonderful things that you can be doing with your kids to make the learning come alive and to give them opportunities that go far beyond what the things that kids are doing in a classroom. Another tool is collaboration. Of course, in the classroom, when one kid's telling another kid an answer, it's called cheating, right? But in the real world, it's called collaboration. It's called smart. If you're sitting in an office and you don't know the answer and you ask the guy next to you, you're smart, right? This is what we do in the real world. It's only in schools that it's kids are kept apart. But we like to, in our classes, we like to create experiences where the kids actually collaborate. This is actually, yes, this is Wendy's son years ago. He's grown up now.
Yes.
But the little blonde. So they were doing an activity where it was an Egyptian week, and they were talking about, they were making an Egyptian collar with beads on it. And those little beads, they had a budget of like $1 and the beads had different costs. And the group together had to figure out which beads they wanted to put on the collar and how many they could afford, which ones they valued more, you know, and in what order they would put them. So it'd be symmetrical when they applied it. So it was a collaborative math activity and they had fun. So, and then let your kids master things. You know, there really is no reason to stop your kids from learning. I've had people over the years, they would tell me, or they would ask me, they would say, do you homeschool during the summer? You know, like, do you take the summer off? And I'll be like, no, I mean, why would I? You know, we're learning and living are like the same thing. There's really we don't separate them out. I don't stop the kids from learning when it's summertime or Christmas break or whatever it is. We're not like, okay, stop learning, stop what you're doing. We just keep going. Because learning and life are all together. Then also, I like to share an experience of a friend of mine who one time her kids were studying caves and they turned their bathroom into a cave and they made stalactites and stalagmites. They put bugs and, you know, just the whole setup. And it stayed that way for a couple of weeks because those children, they were not satisfied with that cave yet. They needed that cave to be just so. And she allowed them to master that. You know, I guess you can't spend 2 whole weeks in a cave unless you build it in your bathroom. So, so they did that. And you can imagine having that in your bathroom for 2 weeks, how profound that learning was, because I still don't know the difference between stalactites and stalagmites, but I bet those kids still do.
Yeah.
So,
I know the difference.
Oh, good.
Stalactites are hanging on tight.
Okay.
Stalagmites are growing up mighty and strong. So they come from the bottom.
I mean, I've heard this so many times. It's just, you know, there you go. So, and I want to point out that learning is the excitement of the hunt. And to express this, I want to share a story about Michelangelo. When he was young, one time he was working on a sculpture and he had some friends that came and said, hey, we're all going on a hunt together. Want to come with us? And he's like, no, that's okay. I'm working here. I've got the sculpture I want to do. And he's like, but you got to come. Everyone's going to be there. It's going to be so much fun. You just got to come. And Michelangelo's response was, for me, carving this sculpture is the excitement of the hunt. He gets just as much enjoyment out of it as going on a hunt with his friends. And I've seen this happen with kids that are homeschooled, kids that are allowed to learn and study and follow their interests. There comes a point, usually in the teen years, when there's something that they're doing that is so deep and so profound and so important for them that they will actually turn down other opportunities. I've had a son that decided not to go to Disneyland because he was working on something before. I'm just saying it happens. And not that I still wanted him to go to Disneyland though. But that's what happens. Learning becomes the excitement of the hunt. And it's hard to stop them once they get into that mode and they know how to learn for the sake of learning because they enjoy it. So normal school is old school. And once you leave the classroom, the possibilities open up. Personally, I believe that in the near future, there will be many more students in schools that are less and less like the schools that we grew up in. These days, there are part-time schools, homeschooling, learning pods, micro schools, charter schools, and so many opportunities that each with their own educational philosophies and approaches to learning. You can find whatever's going to work for your kids or create it. There's no limit. You don't have to do all the things that everybody else is doing because textbooks, worksheets, lectures, and sitting in a crowded classroom for hours a day is old school. It's on its way out because things are changing. And it's a process that approaches futile, and it rarely elicits positive feelings for learning, but exploring, playing, questioning, experimenting, all of these things is not only a more enjoyable way to learn, but it is a more powerful and effective way to learn. So I have a couple resources for you that my resources. I started Celebration Education in 2006, and we have classes right now in Redlands and in Lake Forest. So if you're near either of those locations, you can contact me and I can help you get into those classes. But also, if you're not near either of those locations, just this year, I started a new website called learningoutsidethebox.com. And there I'm actually putting Celebration Education's content up and making it available to people anywhere, everywhere. We have people all over the country that are joining. Excuse me. So you have some access to some ideas that will help you have the more authentic learning experiences. And also, if you wanted to start your own group with a couple other families, the resources are there for that. Ask me whatever questions you want. It's still a new website, and we're actually going to relaunch a whole other website very soon. And there's also a map on the website to help you connect and find other people. So, because learning can be fun, inspiring, effective, interesting, and exciting. But more than that, it's not only that it can be, but that it is, because people are doing it now. And you can be part of this, because the future of education is so exciting. You don't have to wait around for the government to figure all this out, right? Your kids are growing up right now, and you can do what you need to do for your kids. There's no reason to continue to hold them back. You can make a difference for your kids today. And that's what I'm really hoping all of you guys will do.
Okay, so our next conversation is explaining learning styles and why they are important. And we have our beautiful host and hostess, Marty and Carolyn Forte, the owners of Excellence in Education, to present this for us.
Just so you know that we are certified learning style coaches. We went through training with the Learning Success Institute in Ventura. We spent many, many years and hours and hours and hours and hours and dollars to become very knowledgeable in the area of learning styles. And the learning styles is the secret to a successful homeschool journey. Do you want to say why?
Because everyone is different. And schools, just because of the way they operate, it's pretty much one size fits all. Well, one size doesn't really fit all. And so understanding your child's learning style and how it is the same or different from your learning style can be extremely helpful. Because with homeschooling, you don't have to do what everybody else does. You can change the way you operate, as Heather was talking about. You can make what you do fit your child's learning style and be so much more effective.
Yeah.
So before we get into learning styles, what we want to do is talk about a simple program called CARES. And CARES is someone who, one, celebrates the child that you have. Don't celebrate someone else's child. Celebrate the one you have. Don't compare. Accept the role of being your child's coach. Now, this is real fun. What is the purpose of a coach? Anybody here want to give me an answer? Joshua, what's the purpose of a coach?
To help you get better at something.
That's a tool, not a purpose.
To slap you on the butt if you play football.
That's a pleasurable pleasure, but it's not the goal. What's the purpose of a coach?
Help you do your best self.
That's a tool.
Why don't you tell us?
The purpose of a coach. Let me give you an example. You have this big grassy field. You've got a goalpost over here and a goalpost over here. You got a pig bladder in the middle. You got, 12 guys on each side, whatever it is, and you have two maniacs on the sidelines, yelling and screaming and cussing and having a heart attack. Why are these guys having a heart attack? What is their goal? For their team to what? Lose? No, it's to win. Now, the secret now is to find out what the win is. And for instance, the win for Tanaya, my pilot daughter, was different than the win for Tylene. Just like a tennis coach will coach differently than a football coach or a track coach. It's very specific to what the win is for that team. So identify the win, which should be identified not by you as the parent, but what's the win for your child at all ages. And Heather went through a lot of good examples of what the win is. So accept the role as your child's coach. Respond to my child rather than react. And I want to expand on that just for a second. React is highly emotional. That's an instantaneous thing. But if you respond, at least take a few seconds to really contemplate what's going on and assess the entire situation with your child. And maybe, you're looking at, for instance, we're going to get into dispositions. And for instance, kids who are highly creative tend to be late dinner. But you as a parent will look at that as being insubordination. And you get angry. Now we have a conflict-ridden dinner. But if you understood the dispositional behavior of a creative person, you understand that they get lost in time. They don't know 5 minutes from 5 hours. So now you can respond to your child by giving him a timer instead of just going, you da 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 da. Because if you have too much reaction, you're going to have conflict. Conflict will result in separation sooner or later. Expand on your views on how and where teaching and learning takes place. The whole world is your classroom. It's not confined to that 30 by 30 room in the schoolroom or even in your own house. It's the world. And stop supporting bell curve definitions of intelligence, because that's reasonably artificially determined. Okay, Carolyn, you want to do FIT?
The first part of FIT is focus on solutions. And I think that often gets lost in school. So if you have a curriculum, let's say you've got a math book. Most people do have a math book. And what's your goal? For most people, the goal is to get through the math book. But really, is that really what you want? Is that really what's important? Isn't the solution, isn't what you really want for your child to understand the math that's in that book? So don't just look at something artificial like how many pages have been covered or how many correct answers on a test, although that's somewhat helpful. Think more about, are we achieving the goal of understanding math and being able to use it? So then identify my child's goals. So again, if you're used to school, and most of us went to school, and that's the way our mindset kind of snaps back to, we think in terms of the school's goals, the goals of the curriculum or whatever. But if you really want to be successful, like Heather was talking about, you want to find out what the child is interested in. And if you follow that interest, the learning is just automatic and it just snowballs because one thing leads to another. So think about what your child's goals are. What would that child like to learn in order to get to the next place in understanding? Then think about taking the pressure off. Pressure usually doesn't help. It doesn't help you learn. In fact, it retards learning. So be very careful about the way you apply pressure. Now, sometimes it's absolutely necessary, like there's a deadline for you have to go somewhere and you have to get out the door in a certain amount of time. Well, okay, it's appropriate to apply pressure, but always think carefully about learning situations and applying pressure, because in a learning situation, you're more likely to slow the learning down or even stop it by applying pressure. And track successes rather than failure. I'm just going to give a little example from my own life in studying this. I never was a terrific speller. I've always had to have a dictionary handy, or nowadays a little electronic thing, although I'm a far better speller than I once was. But when we were studying with the Learning Success Institute, we studied spelling. And the first thing that Mariama said to me was, okay, try to spell this word. She asked me for a word that I would have difficulty with. And so I tried to spell it. And out of 7 letters, I got 5 right, but 2 of them were wrong. So, you know what she said? She said, congratulations, you got 5 right. So she was affirming already that I was on the road to success. Mm-hmm. And then she showed me how to remember the 2 that I had missed. So you want to think of it that way. If your child only gets 5 out of 10 math problems right, it's not that the child has failed. The child just hasn't learned the other parts of the math that's important. So if you praise him for getting the 5 right, then he's a lot more receptive to learning how to get even more right. So that's something to think about. And teach to your child's learning style. So, of course, you need to know your child's learning style in order to teach to it. Some children respond to one kind of approach with learning, and another child to a very different approach to learning. And of course, as a parent, your child may be similar to your child's learning style. That was the case with me and my older daughter. It was like we had a mind meld. It was so easy for me to teach her. I thought, oh, wow, I'm really good at this. Oh, and then I had the second one. And her learning style and mine are quite different. And so there was a lot of fumbling around because I had not yet learned everything that I know now about learning styles. So I think we're going to move on to a little bit deeper about learning styles.
Okay, so the question becomes, what is your learning style? And what we find, let me ask right now of the participants here, what's your learning style? You don't know. What's your learning style?
I don't know. I feel methodical myself.
Methodical.
Methodical.
Sir, what is your learning style? Aha. Now, when we do the survey, about 95% respond to a modality, meaning like kinesthetic, audio or visual. And so, yes, that's part of your learning style, but we go much deeper, And with our program here, we get into not only modalities, but we also get into dispositions, which is sort of a learning personality, if you would. We get into environment. You go, what's that all about? Well, we're going to tell you in a few minutes. Interests and talents. These all go into determining your total holistic learning style. Any comments on that before we move?
That's what it is.
Isn't that perfect?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. So now we have on modalities, the things that you understand: auditory, visual, tactile, kinesthetic. But the fun part is we can separate things even beyond that. The auditory, you can be auditory listening or auditory verbal. How many times do you hear people talking themselves through a problem or a process, or when you're reading directions, you read it out loud? That is verbal. Miss Carolyn here is very verbal when she's on her learning process. Otherwise, you may have a person who is a listener instead of a verbal person. These are the people who like to hear the lectures. They like to hear the music. They like to hear discussions. So that's a good split down between auditory. Now, visual, you have visual picture. These are the people who like illustrations. These are the people who like videos because they want to see the picture. These are the people who also want to have a real map in front of them instead of just having the little girl on your cell phone telling you how to go from here to there. And then you have the print visual. These are the people who like to read the books, read the directions. Now, what gets quite interesting when we see on our assessment a high visual picture and a high auditory listening, then we have to throw some caution to the wind because these are the people who most likely love to watch TV. And there's too much of that TV watching, it can interfere with your total learning experience. Then, of course, we have the tactile kinesthetic. And these are the hands-on, whole body sketching and writing people. So if your child is tactile kinesthetic and you're talking about the pyramids of Egypt, they might be sitting there actually drawing the pyramid while you're talking. Let them do that because it's actual reinforcing the teaching of whatever you're trying to teach.
Yeah, you can actually prevent learning by insisting that a child hold his hands still and listen. Because some children just can't, and adults just can't pay attention if their hands aren't doing something. Sketching, making notes, whatever. So it's really important to take that into account and figure out a way to accommodate that. And that will enhance learning tremendously.
One trick we learned in our training was that if you are at a table, you have a child who's highly hands-on, whole body, have an activity box on your table that has crayons, colored pencils, construction paper, scissors, modeling clay, pipe cleaners, whatever. And maybe even have the tabletop all butcher paper. And let them doodle, let them draw the pictures while you're talking. I guarantee you that you will have a much more efficient study session with your child, especially the boys, because what you've done is the average boy, and the average child, they got to do something with these things, the hands. They're going, my hands need to be active. And they're thinking about what to do. They cannot just sit on the hands because that gets hard after a while. Let the hands be active, and the brain, the mind will also be active to receiving what you're trying to say to them. Aha, dispositions. Now, there's several dispositions out there. And one of them is performing. You want to talk about performers? You were
All right.
a performer.
Yeah, I'm fairly high in perform. My younger daughter is extremely high. And for people of this disposition, they need to move a lot. And to give you an example, even before I learned this, I did understand that children need to move. I was teaching 6th grade. My classroom was located right next to the school track, which was very fortunate because I had a boy who just was jumping around all the time. And I had the idea to let him go out and run around the track whenever he needed to. And sure enough, it worked like a charm. He could sit and pay attention if I let him run around the track as much as he needed to. So the performed disposition needs to have a lot of movement. They tend to make a lot of fun. They need things to be fun, and they can be the class clown. They do better with short periods of learning. They love games, and the games have to have winners and losers. Don't try to do a no winner game with one of the personality of perform. And they can tend to be impulsive. They don't like schedules. Sometimes they're fine with rules, but sometimes they're not. So you have to approach them in a way to help them understand which rules are absolutely necessary. And they tend to be all about what's happening now. They're not necessarily planners. So, and not every person who's high in this personality will have all these characteristics. You have to realize that we don't pigeonhole people, but they tend to have many of these characteristics. And so it's helpful to understand this, because if you have a parent who is very high in a structured kind of personality, and they've got a child that's very high in perform, which basically means movement, they're going to have a lot of clashes because the parent is not understanding the way that child's world needs to be to maximize learning. So you have to keep this and take this into account when you're structuring however you're operating your school program.
Okay, let's go to producing. This is one of my lowest scores. But the producer, actually the perfect example of a producer is the executive secretary that makes her boss or his boss extremely successful. They're logical and practical. Whereas a lot of other learning dispositions are more impulsive. They want to be logical and practical. They love memorization, and they love study habits. See, I'm a guy, and I sat in the back row at school. There was a girl up front with the apple, always raising her hand. This is the producer. The school classroom is designed for this particular disposition. They love workbooks. They love due dates. Check off the box, check off the box. Very comfortable with rules and predictability. They don't like to be surprised. In fact, they need to know what they're doing the next day before they go to bed that evening. Because if they don't know what's going on the next day, then guess what? They are going to be not sleeping very well. Therefore, they're not going to be at their full capacity. They need to be acknowledged for doing a good job and for being organized. That's their reward. That's their win. We go back to the coach thing. And then they love routine. Don't forget that performer, they go, I don't want routine. I want to be impulsive. So this is why sometimes we have parents who are these checkoff people. They have a hard time with that performing disposition and a few others that we'll be talking about. So just realize if you're that checkoff person, you can be rather rigid. You can be somewhat, in my opinion, hard to live with. And therefore, just get to know who you are and who your children are.
Now, understand, we're talking about 5 different personality dispositions, but nobody is all of any of these. We're all a little bit of all of them. And some are high and some are low. It's just that it's very helpful to understand them all. And then whatever combination you find in your child. So the inventing disposition likes to discover, likes to experiment and invent, likes to try new things. If this person is into cooking, then you're probably going to be presented with some interesting recipes. And some will be great and some maybe not so great, but that's the way this person loves to operate. They need to have enough time to do what they have to do. They like to be in a learning center, labs, field trips, doing things at home in a creative way. This is what they're going to resonate with. They can easily get lost in time because they're involved in what they're inventing, whether it's a hands-on project or something that they're just inventing in their heads. And these kids can get lost in space in a classroom. They can be called ADHD because the teacher mentioned something about maybe astronomy, and all of a sudden this kid's brain just goes off on the Apollo project, and all he can think about is what he remembers about movies and news reports on TV or whatever. So you have to take this into account. This kid does not want anybody to interfere with his projects. He's got his ideas and he's going to move with them. You can help him if he asks, but if he doesn't, he's going to be resistant to having you move in on him. And he needs to be recognized for being clever or being smart and inventing things and so on. And often this personality is really put down in school because this is not what is rewarded in a classroom usually, except for the outside projects that you're assigned to do and then you bring them in. In the middle of a classroom activity, no. These kids are usually labeled some kind of learning disability because their brain is off someplace else, doing something much more interesting than what the teacher's presenting.
Okay, let's go to my top score, Relate Inspire. We are the ones that are somewhat sensitive to others. We like a environment of fairness, and we run on feelings a lot of times. This is the child who try to fix problems. If you have a Relate Inspired child and there's a conflict between 2 siblings, they want to get involved and see if they can get to the kumbaya stage. They love small groups. They love discussions, especially if they can be leading in that or participating in the discussion. You can't find a better friend than a Relate Inspired child. These are the ones that will really be there with you and they'll watch your back for you. And then people, because they're the most important part of their lives, they'll sacrifice to solve issues. They'll even violate their own principles to get to a kumbaya situation in some cases. And that's the downside, because if you're not careful, you'll sacrifice too much for a perceived solution of kumbaya, if you would. And they would love to be recognized for being fair, being kind, and being very thoughtful. Those are the factors that create the win in a relate, inspire, dispositional person. Are you ready for the next one, Miss Carolyn?
All right.
Think, create. Aha, that's you.
Yes.
See?
All right. So these are artistic, creative types. Remember, there's lots of different ways to be artistic, lots of different arts. They need time. Creativity doesn't usually work well with schedules. So you have to be a little flexible with the creative personality. They also would get lost in time because they're creating and they get engaged in a project. And if this is what you want as a homeschool parent, you want them to really delve into things. In school, teachers get frustrated with this sort of thing. And again, these kids will often end up being labeled something. They daydream because they're creating in their heads when they're not creating on paper or with a musical instrument or some other creative activity. But they will bring a sense of openness and wonder to life. They're wonderful, wonderful people to have around because they bring an extra spark, and they need to be rewarded for this. Unfortunately, in school, in many areas, they won't get rewarded for this because that's not what school is looking for the most part. So keep that in mind. There are a lot of good reasons not to follow a school schedule.
The danger for the performing and the think, create individual is that they're both high energy. They both tend to get lost in time. And what happens in the classroom environment is that they call that attention deficit, when in reality, their brain is working overtime. And they're bored with whatever the teacher's trying to tell them. But what happens when a child is labeled attention deficit or hyperactive? What does the system do? It goes straight to pharma, right to the doctor, inject all kinds of stuff in that poor kid to treat them for attention deficit. And what happens there is that you kill that inner soul of those particular dispositional kids. And then they just lose interest in anything because you're flatlining that child as far as their creative juices and their desire to perform or be creative. So be very, very careful in taking counsel from anybody who wants to take a pharmaceutical approach to your child. And if you look at what determines an hyperactive child or attention deficit, every one of us are those. If you take the assessments, gee, I'm off the chart.
We can see that.
And I'm still doing fine. Okay, let's go to the last. We are now going to talk about the environment. And you go, what? What's this thing about the environment? Well, Carolyn, do you like real bright lights or do you like more subtle lights when you're studying?
In between.
In between. Do you run hot or do you run cold? The answer is cold.
Me too, me too.
Does your husband run hot or cold?
Hot,
The answer is hot.
very hot.
And so
Yeah.
all these things, the lighting, the body position, the sound, some kids like background sound. Other kids or other people like quiet. There are people who like the temperature to be on the cooler side. There are some who like the temperature on the hotter side.
Some kids like to study lying on the floor
Or upside down.
on a bed. And others do much better if they're sitting at a desk or a table. So that's not a hard thing to accommodate. It's just that some people, like my mother, never could understand that I much preferred to read on my bed than at a desk. She would always prefer a desk. She didn't understand the difference in learning styles as far as environment. So that's something important to take into account.
And here comes the conflict of the hour. Oh, time. How many kids love to be working from 8 o'clock at night to 1 in the morning? A lot of them. The system does not allow that, but a homeschooler, it can come to fruition. When is your high energy? When is your low energy? If you wake up grumpy and low energy, what should be the first subject you should do? PE. Get that body flowing, get things going. And then that produces those endorphins. Now, let's say your energy level's down in the afternoon and you're high energy in the morning. Well, postpone PE till the afternoon and do the more academically challenging subjects in the morning. So all these things about the environment are critically important in providing your child the environment by which they can function best, and at the same time, take into consideration the family dynamic. Because if you have a dad who's on a graveyard shift, he doesn't need to have his kid playing his music at 3 in the morning because he's wanting to go to bed at 3 in the morning. He's just got off his shift an hour and a half ago. So it's a real interesting dynamic to take into consideration the environment of your home and how your child best reacts to all these different things that we have talked about. So, Miss Carolyn, you ready for the next one? Interest.
All right, so different people are interested in different things. Hello? Schools, they just have a curriculum that's laid out. I don't know, somebody threw a dart at a wall that had lots of science subjects and decided that 7th graders should do life science. But that isn't the way life is. People like to study what they're interested in. And if you want to develop a love of learning in your child, you want to be flexible. Go toward what they're interested in. There's nothing that's disconnected from everything else. You will always ultimately learn the things that are vitally important to know. But if you can tailor your studies to what your child is interested in, you'll go much, much farther. So you want to pay attention to that, see what their favorite subjects are, and use them. You don't have to just follow an artificial schedule that somebody else made. You can just go with what your child is interested in and follow that thread, and you'll be amazed where it'll take you.
And the easy way to measure an interest is, what's that activity that your child or yourself want to spend time on? You want to spend time with aviation, or in the case of my grandson, he spends an inordinate amount of time on fishing. He's 16 now. He's one of the top 100 bass fishermen in the state of California for his age group. So he's taken his interest, and now he also has taken in his talent. And talents are those things that come easy to you. Fishing comes easy to him. He's got an interest. Now he's got what we call a passion, and he's got ownership. And the important part of ownership and passion is that now the child can be invested in their educational path. And if your child's invested, then we make the whole journey a whole lot easier. And if that passion becomes a goal for some vocational or professional goal, then when it comes to disciplining your child, all you got to do is ask your child, will this help you or hurt you toward your win, toward your goal? And that's why you want to let the kids explore, so they can discover things that come easy to them.
And you have to remember, we had to learn that a talent isn't always something that you have a natural gift for. The way we think of talents, it's easy for you to spend time on it. It might look to an observer like you're not good at that. And yeah, the child might not be good at that in the beginning. But if you let him continue to work on those things that he's really interested in working on, you may be absolutely stunned by what ultimately is produced.
An example would be our two girls. Our youngest daughter had a phenomenal talent in music. And she was a little thing, shorter than this table.
3.
She can hear something musically and go right away to the piano and she can play it. But she didn't have an interest. Now her sister, who has no talent really in music, she's the
And
one.
not a parent. All right.
Yes, as a parent. Yes, I'll stand corrected. But she's the one that was making $100 an hour playing the harp.
Because she wanted it so much. This was such a strong interest with her that she basically developed it into a talent.
So that, taking consideration all the talents. Then lastly, that pretty much finishes our presentation. But if you're more interested in the learning styles, you can go to our website, excellenceineducationhomeschooling.com. And built into our website is a learning style assessment tab. And you can go there, and if you want, you can actually take the learning style assessment. We highly recommend that both the children and the parents take the assessment, because you want to know what your learning style is, because that determines to a large degree your teaching style. And you want to be sure you're compatible with your child's learning style. So take a look at that. We are very excited about learning styles. We sincerely believe that learning styles can make or break the success of your homeschool journey. Minimally, it'll make your life a whole lot more fun. And you're going to keep the bond between you and your children instead of conflict. Remember, too much conflict results in separation. And we don't want to see the separation. We want to see a bonding that when your kids are 18, 19, and 20, they reflect back on their high school years or junior high, elementary years with fondness and an affection toward the parent, not look at the parent as being the enemy. So hang in there, and I'm going to now go back and say, stop share.
I have one question for you guys. Say
Yes.
a family goes online and does the assessment, and then they get the information back that they want more help. Can they contact you to
Absolutely.
go over it with them
Yes.
and to talk about it? Okay, so I put the link up for your guys' website, and then I put the direct link up for your link to the assessment. And
Right.
Then if you need more help, contact them. They're always here and they're always answering their phone.
And what we have is that if you use the link that was just provided, and it's also on our
Yes.
website, it's a discounted rate.
Yes.
And that allows you to not go, ugh, it's not that expensive to take it. And I guarantee you, if you
Aw.
invest in the money, you will not be spending that amount of money or more on buying cases of wine to get through your homeschool journey.
And you can save thousands of dollars on curriculum
Yes.
that you should never have spent any money on because it's the wrong
Exactly.
thing for that
Exactly.
child.
Right, yeah. And that's another thing I always suggest. If you are within 100 miles of excellence in education and you're going to start homeschooling and you're looking for curriculum, I suggest you take a day trip and you come here and you check out their bookstore, because it's one of the few places in California where you can get your hands on homeschool curriculum, look at it before you purchase it.
Well,
Perfect.
onward and forward. Where do we go next, fearless leader?
So next we are discussing why homeschool and school curriculum differs. And we're just going to jump into curriculum, which I think is more just a discussion between all of us. And
Great.
You don't have
Yeah.
a slideshow for it, right?
No,
And then you're going to talk about the game curriculum.
Yes.
okay.
Perfect. Okay, so you want me to scoot closer to them so we can be on one camera?
Yeah, we can, that or we can go to this camera too.
And Jennifer is saying how amazing you guys are.
I saw that. Thank you, Jennifer.
Oh, he came out so we can see it.
Yes, awesome.
So I put in the chat, the first thing I always recommend, because this is always the first question I get. Okay, I'm homeschooling now. What curriculum should I buy? And there's all these beautiful box sets, and they cost like, they could be over $1,000. And then you're going to buy this $1,000 curriculum and it might not work for a variety of reasons. So my first suggestion is don't buy any curriculum right out of the gates. Even if you don't take the learning style assessment, just spend some time, explore learning together, go on field trips, go to park day, read books, go to the library, use free resources. The internet's full of free resources. And I do have a list on my Homeschool Concierge website of it, and you literally scroll forever, and it's all free resources. And you could literally homeschool from preschool all the way through high school with a number of free curriculums. So don't buy anything yet. Consider what you're doing and how you work together with your students, and then maybe buy some curriculum, because there is some really cool curriculum out there too.
And if you go to a homeschool convention, especially some of the larger ones,
Yes.
you will see all these vendors. And we're vendors, so I know. We're going to tell you, and the other vendors are going to say, I have the silver bullet. This is
Yeah.
it.
We're
You-
not going
you're
to tell
gonna
you
be
that. No.
Successful. And all you got to do is just sign right here. Now you just spent $1,000.
Yeah.
Now, here comes the issue. If you buy that curriculum and it doesn't work, and your husband is lukewarm on homeschooling,
Oh.
and then you have to go and say, dear, I just threw away $1,000 because it doesn't work.
Right.
And he's going, oh man, that was that trip to Hawaii.
That's right.
So you're going to have the courage to throw away the curriculum. It's not working for your children. You always have to look at what's your long-term goal. Your reason for homeschooling has to be stronger than any obstacle that will come your way. And if you make a mistake of making an emotional decision on buying a curriculum, it can be a very negative
Right.
on that relationship with you and your husband, for
Right.
one.
And with
also
you
with
and
the
your
kids.
And
kids.
with your kids. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, when we first started homeschooling, I didn't know what I was doing. And so I pulled him out and I thought I could create school at home, because that's what education looks like, right? You sit at a table and you do your work. Well, if that had worked for him, I wouldn't have had to pull him out of school. So I had bought like all this curriculum, and then we joined the charter school, which provided us curriculum. And then, I tried and sit him down, and every day we would both end up in tears
Yes.
And I was like, well, I'm just going to put him back in school because I'd rather him hate his teacher than hate his mother. So we ended up throwing out the curriculum, but you don't know that when you first get started. So just know that it's okay to not use curriculum at first. Just get to know each other.
And realize too that, especially now with the way the economy is, the dollars are getting scarce. Don't be afraid to be creative.
Right.
Don't be afraid to use the library. Don't be afraid to utilize some resources that can be found on the internet.
Right.
You can almost teach anything on YouTube or learn anything on YouTube.
Right.
But don't be addicted to it either.
Right.
Put some balance in there. And play doesn't cost anything.
Right.
And you need to have at least 1 to 2 hours a day of unstructured play for your kids every day. And that will create creativity, that will create a thinking process. The only rule that we recommend is that they can do anything they want that you approve of, with the exception of electronics. 0 electronics. And that's going to cause a heart attack right there. I'm sorry. But you need to break the kids from being on electronics and 20 hours a day. But what will happen is they're going to say, I'm bored.
Right.
And your response as a parent, as a coach, is to say, boredom is a lack of mental stimulation. So I suggest you go out and stimulate your mental, and I'm going to go back to my work.
Well, it's also funny how if they're on it, they can't think of doing anything else. Like, oh no, I can't do anything else. But if you do get them off and you get them out, then they have a great time. I've been dragging the reason I homeschool Athen, my oldest, he is older now, so he likes to spend a lot of time on the computer, and I tend to let him do what he wants to do because he's older. He needs to self-direct himself, but he'll be like, I don't want to go on that field trip. Mom, I've done that field trip. I don't want to go. And then I say, no, you're coming because we're all going. And he ends up having a better time than his little siblings. So once you get them off and you get them engaged, trust me, they're going to have a good time. And so once they see that they are having a good time, they're less argumentative with you about it. So
when you go to the conventions or you're going to a seminar and someone's offering you this silver bullet, I know when we go to the LA County Fair, we love going to the marketplace.
Yes.
And there's all these wonderful things I just want to have. But our response to all the salespeople is, we're going to do a walk and talk.
Yeah.
And about 10% of the time we go back. 90% of the time we save a lot of money.
Right.
So
And you have to think about, this is where learning styles is so important to understand, because if you as a parent are looking at some kind of curriculum materials, maybe it's a history thing or something, you're going to gravitate to the thing that resonates with your learning style. And you really need to know, okay, is this going to work for my child? I mean, I just love creative things. I love to build things. I always wished I had more money for Legos or this or that. And I bought this building thing at a convention for my kids. They didn't like it at all. They weren't interested.
You were playing with it.
But yeah, oh yeah, I'm into it. I'll do it. So just you really need to pay attention, and you're going to lose a lot of money.
Right.
And be frustrated.
Well, and there's whole groups on Facebook as well. And I gave you guys the list already of where you can buy used homeschool curriculum. So you don't necessarily have to buy it new. You guys have a whole used. Right?
I would say half of what we have in 3,000 square feet in inventory is used books.
Right.
And eBay is a phenomenal source of used books.
Used books. Right.
Don't underestimate eBay. And
A-books, and there are a lot of used sources. Right. And here's why. Because so many people buy stuff and then they find out it doesn't work for their kids at all. Yeah. So they've written in 5 pages and the rest is pristine.
Right.
Perfect.
And if it works for your child, fine. If it doesn't work, you want to pay attention. Just because it looks beautiful and it's the kind of thing you had in school doesn't mean it's a good learning tool for your child.
Well, and what worked maybe a year ago isn't necessarily going to work the next year. We've had to change plans and
yeah, sure.
curriculums multiple times over our 13 years.
But you also have to stay away
Yeah.
from fads.
Yes.
I mean, built into the homeschool community, we've been doing this for 30 years, and we've seen things come and go, and there'll be a fad. And I'm not going to mention the fad because I don't want people getting upset with that.
There's a new fad every year in every subject.
Now, the fad may not work for your child.
Right.
Now, since we're talking about your child, it is critically important, and I think from even early age of 6 or 7, let them have ownership and choices.
Yeah, for sure.
They can be at least on the advisory committee.
Yes.
They don't have dictatorial, but they can have advisory input.
Right.
And if they don't like it, see if it's just a reaction versus a response to it.
Well, yeah, a long-term response. Right.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, I think the thing we've been most successful with in our homeschool journey is following their interests, not necessarily using the same curriculum. So we'll jump between curriculums or jump between learning resources to follow their interests and dive super deeply into that. And that may look like videos online. That may look like going to the library and pulling things out. That may look like research online. That may look like doing lots of field trips. It may look like being in the park. It could look very different. So one of the things we really love in our family is games. And I, now that I'm privately homeschooling, I don't worry about matching things to the standards or anything like that. But so many of the things that we learn through game schooling is very educational and helps our students. So I know Carolyn is quite the expert on gaming and learning.
Well, yes, I like to play games.
Right.
And I did it when I was a classroom teacher. I used games as much as I could and activities. And I found out that my children learned much, much better with games. I did not know at that time what Dr. Karen Purvis announced at a seminar we went to 5 or 6 years ago. She said scientists have recently discovered that it takes about 400 repetitions to create a new synapse in the brain, unless you do it with play, in which case it takes 10 to 20 repetitions with an average of 12. So would you rather play a game 12 times or do 400 flashcards of one fact? So just think about the difference there.
Yeah.
Games can enhance learning so much. I think Heather was talking about the importance of emotions connected with homeschooling, with learning. And that's another thing that Dr. Purvis said, that the center in the brain that is responsible for memory is right next to the emotion center. And so they theorize that if something makes you happy and excited, you're going to remember it better.
Right.
So make it interesting. And for different kids, different things will be interesting. There are so many different kinds of games, and different people resonate to different kinds of games.
Right.
So some kids only want a strategy game.
Yes.
And other kids want a game that's more skill-based. I mean, and I could go on and on, but if you want some ideas, I wrote the game curriculum, so you can go online. It's
I
not,
put a link to it in the chat for everybody.
it's not a curriculum that you buy.
Right.
It's ideas for using games to teach any subject and any grade level.
Right. And I think Like my first struggle I had with homeschooling was the picture of what education looked like in my mind. You know, I grew up going to traditional school. And so when I pulled my oldest out, sat him at that table and it didn't work. I was the only one struggling with the idea of doing something different. He was ready to jump in and do something different. So I think it's really important to try and get out of your mind what you think education looks like and open your mind to exploring all of these other possibilities. And I think you'll see that your kids are going to learn. My kids teach me things all the time now. I'm like, I didn't know that.
Right.
So it's like, you just have to be ready to embrace that. And it is scary at first. I remember being scared.
It's pretty universal.
Yeah.
Everybody is scared at the beginning. So welcome to the club.
Yes, right.
And everybody, you think you're sailing along for a while and then, that little bit of doubt creeps in and then you start wondering, am I doing the right thing? Is he learning enough?
Right.
Everybody goes through this. Don't worry about it.
Right. Yeah. It's not just you.
Yeah.
What's interesting about our game curriculum, what we've done is we've separated by grade, which we don't like doing, but it gives you an idea of where the skill level is.
Right.
Then we bring it by subject, math, history, whatever, science. Then we describe what the game is, how many minutes it takes, what the objective is, and we tie it into learning styles as well.
Right.
So it becomes a real good resource for figuring out how you can use various board games. We're not talking about electronic games. We're talking about board games.
Board games, card games, active games, like things with balls and things where you have to move, and so that you can better choose what will be successful with the particular child or children that you're working with. Some games that we thought were wonderful have gone out of print. However, thankfully now we have places like eBay and
garage sales are a great place to buy games.
Garage sales.
Yeah.
Garage sales.
You can find.
I mean, you can buy them for 25 cents, 50 cents, $1. Just pick them up, even if you don't know that you're going to like them, because they hardly cost you anything. You can always pass them to another homeschool family.
Sure.
But even if you play it once, you're learning something with it. Right.
Yeah.
So we love picking games up at garage sales. Yeah.
And one thing to understand about the game curriculum, though, is that it's not exhaustive. If I were to put down every awesome math game for multiplication, it would be pages and pages. And
but it is very thorough. There's a lot on
here. There's a lot there, but it's an idea factory.
Yes.
So think of it that way.
And what's really exciting is that we're seeing our young people within our PSP and our Park Day group, they're having board game days.
Right.
Every Park Day now, there's a complete section with teenagers and tweens playing board games. They meet here once a week, getting together and just playing board games. And there's no parents around. It's just them. They're having fun. They're learning. And they're socializing.
Right. Well, and they're also, someone ends up being the leader. Someone's then giving direction. So they're also learning all these other skills for being able to work in the workplace, being able to have social interactions and all those things. So super important. Right.
We enjoy that.
Yes. I think the other important thing to discuss is the curriculum that the schools are using in a classroom are designed to get each kid where they need to be. And they really are focused on those kids that are in the middle. Whereas when you're homeschooling, you can use whatever your child needs to explore that topic. And it might just be the topic that they're interested in. But remember, everything designed for a school is for classroom control and keeping those students in their desks. And everything we do for homeschooling is for making the children love learning and to explore things. It's not about controlling them. Right.
Yeah. To develop real learning, the love of learning, and give them the tools so that they can teach themselves.
Yeah.
Because I think you had a slide up earlier of all a lot of famous people, not
Oh, yes.
by any means all,
Right.
but a lot of famous people
That
who had very little, if any, formal education, but they all loved learning
Yes.
and they all learn how to teach themselves. And I think that should be our ultimate goal.
It should, yeah.
Even if your child ultimately is going to go get a PhD and be a rocket scientist or whatever they do, they need to have the ability to teach themselves. Actually, when our oldest went to college, she found that she was in a minority in being able to teach herself, and she found herself teaching other students
Right.
how to figure it out, because they don't hold your hand in
No.
college.
Mhm.
They
No,
throw it
no.
out and you have to deal
You
with
have to
it.
deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny though, because I, growing up, had always like, my teachers had always kind of made me feel like I was stupid and that I didn't catch on to things because I'm not a quick learner. I'm slower than probably your average person, but it wasn't until I got into college that I realized, hey, I'm not any stupider than anybody else.
Amen to that. Oh, my goodness. Yeah.
So then I did really well. So I think that school actually kind of destroyed my love of learning. And it wasn't until I got into college and had the freedom to learn things my way that I discovered, hey, I can learn. And those people were just telling me I couldn't. So,
Right.
And that should be,
and that's what we don't do to our children.
that should be
Right.
forefront
Yes.
in your homeschool theology, if you
Mhm.
would, that the purpose that you want is to create the love of
The
learning
love of learning.
within your child. And that's why you have to be a little bit out of the box.
Yes.
You have to crush the box
Right.
and escape. And you will find that the results are phenomenal. In
Yeah.
98% of the cases.
And I think we should mention special needs,
Right.
Oh, yes.
because if you're pulling a child out who has had special services or this or that, and a lot of people worry, well, I won't be able to get speech, I won't be able to get this or that. Things are available in homeschooling, and you can start tailoring the curriculum better. I've had parents tell me that the child is actually working on a third grade level, but the school is saying, well, we'll adapt the 10th grade curriculum for him. Well, I'm talking about math. And so that doesn't help a child at all. You need to take a child where he is in a subject and move forward from there. And you'd be amazed how far they can go.
Well, a lot of
If you
times
do
just getting
that.
them out of that classroom,
Yes.
you don't need all of those accommodations anymore because you remove the restrictions around your child. And now suddenly they can explore all these things and learn all these things in their own method.
Right. And you
Right.
can control the environment better for that child.
And one of the
And when they need a
problems,
break, they can run around and take
Yeah.
a break. Right.
one of the problems that I found, I used to work with special needs adults, is that if they're segregated out of the system,
Right.
their performance, their intelligence level will migrate downward to the lowest common denominator. And we had many kids and young adults who were diagnosed when they were actually very intelligent, but they were slotted in with other kids of lower performance standards, and therefore they became that.
Well, if you spend time telling a child they can't get something, they can't understand something, they'll never do this. I've had other conversations with parents who were told by the school district, your child will never do this. And then they pulled them out and their children are doing those things now. So you can't always listen to those things.
That's right.
No,
That's
the
right.
specialists are not always in the game at the ground level. They're in the game at the theoretical level.
And there are lots and lots of resources available within the homeschool community.
I gave a couple of links in here for help in the chat for homeschooling special needs students.
Now, what's important to understand is that you cannot do worse in creating an IEP for your own child. I mean, the IEP, an individualized education plan, for a homeschool child is so personal and so integrated with family and resources. And we take that holistic approach to the child. We've had a lot of kids have to sacrifice their quote public IEP, become homeschooled, and they have flourished.
Right.
They have
Well, and if
totally
there's
flourished.
specific services you need and you leave and you're homeschooling privately, you can ask your doctor, you can ask the local resource centers. There's ways to still get some services, just not necessarily through the school district. And there are some school districts that will work with the homeschool family to do some of the services if you really feel like you need them. But it's a conversation you have to have and figure that out. So you can email me if you're looking for help with that. Yeah. But a lot of times you find they don't need the services. They're not being controlled in a classroom.
Right, and you're individualizing.
Yeah, everything's already individualized for your child.
Right.
If there are any, otherwise you can.
Well, for this, I think we have still 16 or so participants.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today. Wow.
One more plug to please join California Homeschool Network. It's only $30 for the year. I put the link in a couple of times. I can do it again. Go ahead, Marty.
And so if you have any questions or concerns, now's the time to do it before we pick one of the lucky winners that we can come to your house for dinner.
All right.
And we can spend one-on-one time with you.
That's right.
Okay. You got to thank you.
Oops. Oh, you're welcome, Rosa. I think I copied the game curriculum again. So hang on, I'm looking for the thing to join CHN. But yeah, if you don't have questions, feel free. You can
Okay,
you can
question
log off,
is,
but let us know if you have questions.
we have a question. Are there any requirements with the state, or can we just start
At
present levels with our kiddos with special needs?
Oh.
That's a very good question,
Yeah.
Natalie. Thank you for it. And yes, you can start right now. I would. Where are you located, Natalie? You have a location?
Once you're homeschooling, there's no requirements for what concepts you need to cover at what time. It's totally up to you as the admin of your private school. So you don't need to worry about following the California state standards as such.
Okay, Natalie, in
Riverside.
County. Okay. What special needs do your children have? Would be my question to you.
Hey,
Are you able to hear me?
yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Yes. My little girl is in 4th grade and has Down syndrome. So her ID on her IEP would be the intellectual disability. And then she also has a, speech delay. So she uses an AAC device. So she's not completely nonverbal, but she does have, limited vocabulary, I guess I should say.
She may do far, far better at home because she'll have much more conversation with you than she'd be able to have in a classroom. And that'll help her develop the speech.
That's
She'll feel safe at home.
Yeah, she'll feel
And
safe at home.
yeah, and safe in trying. Does she need speech therapy or is it just?
she does have speech therapy. She has it at school, and then we also have it privately through our insurance. It's funded that way. So we do have those services. And I agree with you with the speech. That is one thing we learned during COVID was how much she did flourish. And I think it was because she was at home, because we understood her and we can expand upon her language, where if she was at school and people just don't understand her, they wouldn't, expand. And, they kind of would maybe overlook it at school because they didn't understand her and they would probably move on. Whereas at home, we knew what she was saying and we could, keep the conversation going.
Right.
Yeah, you may find that she moves ahead far, far more quickly
Right.
being at home. and getting, really, she's getting one-on-one services
Yeah.
with you.
With you, right.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, the answer is yes, you need to start her where her understanding
yeah.
is in any subject area and just move forward and go with her natural learning schedule. So,
And around things that she's interested in learning. So you can kind of evaluate where she actually is, because the information you're getting from the school might not necessarily correlate with how she learns and what she can perform and do at home. So maybe even start with something like the game curriculum or one of the free curriculums on the resource list that I provided, and kind of see how you guys do.
or just think of daily household activities, because I used to take equipment and go cook with my children
Right.
in the classroom, but you've got a whole home laboratory in your kitchen.
Yeah.
And cooking is a wonderful place to learn for language development, for reading, for math, just by doing. And
Yeah.
not to mention health and safety and all kinds of science
Science.
that is just there inherent in whatever you might be doing in a kitchen. And I just talked about the kitchen. You know, I can go off through the whole house and the garden.
Oh yeah, there's whole websites devoted to science experiments you can do in the kitchen. So like if she's interested in science, you could explore that on top of cooking all in the kitchen.
Another thing I'm going to recommend is equine therapy. We have seen such tremendous benefits through the use of horses.
Yes.
Yes.
It's just absolutely awesome because these horses just have a way to connect with kids.
How far are you from? I just went on the coolest field trip to the mini
horses.
Itty bitty mini horses.
Itty bitty mini.
Yes, and she does horse therapy.
And they do.
Yes, she does. And she's happy to have homeschool field trips there as well. So let me find that website.
I completely agree with you. My daughter was in a program in Norco. And in fact, as we're discussing, this entertaining the homeschool idea, our thoughts are getting her back in because she did graduate from the program. She was in it at the time for PT. And when she was discharged from it, and I'm telling you, it was the most wonderful decision we ever made to get her walking. This is when she, was much younger, of course, but she did, she was in the program for 3 years, and many children develop, language skills and other things too. And I highly recommend it for anything. And in fact, if we do make this decision for homeschool, we're definitely going to make that as a part of, they have adaptive writing. And we can incorporate that to supplement and also to be like a social thing too, because in that situation, it won't be just riding the horses. It will also be taking care of them and, working on the ranch and socializing. So there is one out in Norco that we did go to, and I can give a name if someone wants to hear a name or if I'm allowed to say a name. But other than that,
you can say it. I just put the link to the one that we went to. I can actually only find her Facebook page. But it's Itty Bitty Mini Horse Encounters, and it's in Norco. But yeah, please share if you have another one.
Yes, the name of the facility was Leaps and Bounds. They are in Norco. They also provide speech. They provide speech, PT, and the hippotherapy is what they call it, with the horses. So
right.
Did you get the name?
Leaps and Bounds Pediatric Therapy in Norco?
Correct.
Yes, I found it. I'm going to put it in the chat for anyone that wants it.
Okay.
Thank you for sharing.
The one thing I recommend too is that if it becomes a little bit on the expensive side, be willing to trade some sweat equity. My grandson up in the north, he has had some sensory issues that mimics to some degree the autistic spectrum, but he got into horses, and he and his brother and sister would go in and knock the stalls, groom the horses, all that stuff, to the point that they were able to get riding lessons for free. And then they went ahead and bought some horses, and they're able to have the stable board the horses until they get their stable built on their own property.
And now he's training other people's horses.
Yes. And this kid, he's 14. It's amazing. I mean, if he thinks about it, his horse will do it. They are one. And it's amazing to see that.
Marty, if you join CHN, don't we send out an ID that says you're a teacher, don't we?
We can, yes.
Okay, so yeah, I believe that's included in joining California Homeschool Network. There's also a number of places online that you can print them yourself. I just put one in the chat because someone just asked about where they can get an ID for that, for getting discounts. There are a lot of places that offer teacher discounts if you have your ID.
So Natalie, we wish you great success with your daughter, I think
Yes.
it was. And if you'd like, drop on by, pay us a visit. We've had a lot of experience with our special
Is she
needs
within 100
community.
miles? Because I told them all,
Yeah,
so
she
within
is.
100 miles,
Yeah.
they should
Yes.
come.
Well, and go to our website and we don't have them up for the January and forward field trips yet, but we will. And we have lately, most of our field trips have been in San Bernardino and Riverside counties and Orange County.
Right.
So that you may find a field trip that you would like to join us on, and you're welcome.
Yes.
So all you have to do is call us up and we'll register you for the field trip.
That's
that you
one of the
want.
differences about EIE is that we do not require you to be part of our PSP to participate
field
on
trip.
anything else we do. You can come to our park days, you can come to our field trips, you can come to our seminars, you can come to our bookstore, you can take classes at our facility. It's whatever you want, whatever you need. You don't have you be part of the academy to do that, even though we recommend the academy, of
That's
course.
true. But they don't leave you out if you're homeschooling
we-
privately, or you even allowed, I met you the first
Charter
time
people,
I was a charter
right.
school student. We
Right.
were on a field trip with them. Yep.
So we wish you great success with your daughter. It's going to be a wonderful life for you and her. You
And this-
obviously are doing some great things with her, so congratulations.
Thank you so much. This has been wonderful, and I've learned so much from all of you today, and look forward to a brighter future. Thank you.
Yes,
And then I'll just mention also Heather, who was here with Celebration Education. She and I with Homeschool Concierge, we also do field trips together. So I'll give you the link. There's none up there right now because we just did the Revolutionary War at Riley's Farms this week. So I have to get the rest up, but I will give you the link to that in the chat. Okay, let me see what other questions we have. Oh, good. Yay. Good. Jennifer was on our field trip with us. That's right. Okay. I thought your name looked familiar.
She was on ours yesterday.
Oh, she
Pretty
was on
sure.
you. Oh, you guys
Yeah.
were there yesterday?
We were there
What day
yesterday.
were we there?
Yeah.
Wednesday? You guys went the day after us?
Yeah.
That's funny. We should have just all gone together.
yeah.
Maybe we
Maybe
need
I
to
should talk to
coordinate.
you
more
what field trips
freebies.
you guys are doing
We
because
do. We need to
that's what we should
coordinate.
do. Okay. So yes. All right. So you can look for field trips on any of our free websites. And then there's a lot of other, like I told you also about the Facebook groups, there's also a lot of field trips put on there as well. So if say, once you're in the community, you're going to find out that there's actually too much to do. And then you have to be savvy enough to pick the things that are important to you and ignore the rest. So
There's a
Yeah.
great group of ladies out in the Inland Empire, and it's the Holistic Moms organization. And we've spoken at their functions on an annual basis, but they are awesome. You may find some really good ideas from that organization.
is this it? No, this is New Jersey. I'll look for that one too.
It's a nationwide, but there's
That's right.
chapters in different places.
Right.
Okay.
But the local people out in the inland
Oh, here we go.
is awesome.
Yes, here it is. Okay, I'm gonna put this in. Holistic Moms. I know, I think they've had us speak there before. Here's the website. I'll put in the website.
Any other questions from anybody?
Thank you guys so much for being here.
Yes, we appreciate it, and we hope that we made your Saturday afternoon beneficial,
Yeah.
informative, and maybe allow you to make the decision to go ahead and take the jump. It's worth
That's
it.
right.
Don't let fear stands for false evidence appearing real. Don't forget, you qualify to homeschool because you love your children, about 98.6 degrees. And there's no other teacher that can give that amount of love and attention to your children. If you start having conflict with your kids, connect with one of us, and we'll help you minimize the conflict.
Yes, for sure.
Because
And they're
we love you.
always here. You can literally just walk into their facility if you want to and talk to them. And then I gave you my email address if you want to email me. You can
Yeah.
call.
And if you're worried because you think you don't know how to teach, okay, consider this. Who taught your child to speak English?
Yeah, you've been your child's teacher since the moment they were born. Don't let the schools make you think that you can no longer teach your child.
And here is a hidden secret that they don't talk about. The group of people who have the hardest time to homeschool, that transition, are credentialed
Teachers.
teachers.
Yes, we have the most to unlearn,
But even you were able to do it.
but even I was able.
A whole new paradigm shift. It's
Yes.
going from group management to one-on-one tutorial.
Right.
basically.
Right. And it's definitely like, I always call it like a family learning adventure. We're always learning everything together.
Yes,
I no longer
yes.
worry about what grade someone's in because my children are Athens, a senior, he's 8, he just turned 18, and then Hudson is 13 and Bailey is 8. So they are really far apart, but we still do everything together. So
And here's the fun part. When my girls were growing up, I had a real job. And my real job, I was on the road from 1 to 3 weeks out of the month.
right.
And so I was able to, many trips, take my family with me.
Yeah.
All we do is get 2 beds instead of 1. And what I expense out for my own steak dinner, I could feed the family of 4 at Denny's. And my girls learned how to explore.
Right.
They learned how to use public transportation. They learned to see, they actually learned and enjoyed and discovered the coefficient of friction between epidermal tissue and H2O particles impregnated with a chloride solution. That's the scientific version of my girls have swam in the best hotel pools
Right,
on the West Coast.
On the West Coast. Well, it also, I think one of the questions we all get a lot is what about socialization? Which always
Yeah.
makes me laugh because
Yeah,
to
yeah.
me, how is a child sitting in a classroom in their neighborhood with kids all from the same area with a teacher who probably also lives within that area, same exact demographics, most likely. How's that child being socialized? They're being institutionalized.
Right.
Our children are being socialized. So don't worry about that.
The world is our classroom.
That's right. If they try and talk, they're not even allowed to talk. That's true.
The socialization influence of the typical classroom child is plus or minus 6 months of their birthday.
Right.
The socialization influence of the typical homeschool child, if you do it properly,
Right.
you're not sitting in your house all
Not
day
in the house all
long.
the time. Right.
You're out there exploring, you're out there enjoying, is plus or minus a lifetime.
Right.
We have grandparents talking to 3-year-olds at our park days. We have, the kids are playing field sports. And we've got about a 10-year difference
Yeah.
in there. And it's fantastic. It really is.
Well, we go to a park day on Tuesdays and the teens will be hanging out over somewhere over there by themselves, trying to be away from the young ones. And then my 8-year-old Bailey will go over, we're going to play Sandman. You guys need to come. And then within a few minutes,
Yep.
the teens are playing on the equipment with the little kids and they all are having a great time and nobody's worried about who's little and who's big. And, oh, I can't talk to them because they're young. And nope, they all just play together and help each other. And it's beautiful. Oh, good. We have some teachers now.
Yeah.
Okay,
I
good.
love it.
Welcome. All right. So let us know. Yes, I will pull the recording and the notes from the chat and email that to all of the attendees.
And you can share them.
Yes, please feel free.
All righty. Well, I
Tell
think-
your friends to join CHN. We need more members.
Yes.
All right.
The important part about statewide organizations, there's 3 of them, is that we are the organizations that keep track of what's going on in Sacramento and to some degree in Washington. We are the ones who are advocating for the right to homeschool in the state of California. If we don't have people following the legislative process and the judicial process, we will eventually lose our privileges. So we would highly appreciate any support you can give us, and the best support is a membership. So that way you are also kept informed and you can participate in necessary. So we appreciate you all, and we want to wish you a fantastic Christmas season.
Yes.
That's coming up.
Holidays are upon us.
Yes, and just enjoy, enjoy, enjoy. And also, my last commentary will be never, ever, ever compare. Don't compare. We have dinner with your cousins. And I know with our family, my girls did not learn to read. My daughter, who's the pilot, did not learn to read until she was 8.5. My daughter, who's a pastor, she studied theology. That's a lot of reading.
Yeah, a lot of reading.
What was she, 10 and
10 and
a
a
half?
half.
10 and a half. But they made it. And their cousins, who are younger than them, were, of course, studying nuclear physics before lunch.
You know.
You know? So don't compare.
Yeah, don't compare.
Don't
Right?
compare. And it's just not, when you start comparing, there's always going to be a loser. That's
Yeah.
going to be you.
Well, and it's going to make a kid feel bad
Yep.
about what they know and what they
You'll
don't know,
feel
because
bad.
there's other things that they know better than anyone else. So don't compare.
That's right. That's right.
All righty. Well, I think it's
Have
time
a
to
great
say
weekend.
adios.
Yes.
Thank you so very much.
Bye,
for being
everybody.
with us.
Thank you.